Howdy freeze dryers, it's cold outside, so today we're gonna make a recipe that's gonna warm you from the inside out. It's a very familiar recipe. It's gonna cure your cabin fever for the wintertime. This is also gonna make a really good meal in a jar recipe, and we're gonna use the dividers to put this recipe into portions. I'm gonna show you how to make this freeze dryer friendly today. I'm gonna give you the recipe, and we're also gonna rehydrate at the end with a taste test, so stick around. First, we need to dice up our vegetables. The carrots and the celery are optional to this recipe. We're gonna cut all of these into smaller pieces than you probably normally would, just so they freeze dry and rehydrate better. So we're gonna cut up one potato first. Next, we're gonna do half an onion. Once your veggies are cut, we're gonna add just a little bit of vegetable broth or broth at the bottom of a pan so we can saute our vegetables in that as opposed to oil. And then once all of your veggies are ready, we're gonna go into that pot and we're gonna saute all of the vegetables. Next, we'll do 2 to 3 cups of chopped broccoli. Now 1 to 2 stalks of celery. This is an optional ingredient. Another optional ingredient is 3 to 4 carrots. Last, we're gonna add in 2 cloves of garlic, or if you're doing minced garlic out of a jar, it's 1 teaspoon of garlic. We're gonna saute all of these vegetables until they're soft, and then we're gonna add some more ingredients. Now we're gonna add 2 to 3 cups of vegetable broth. You can also use rehydrated vegetable broth. If you have not seen that video, I can put a link down in the description of this video. And then 2 cups of milk. We're gonna stir that in. We're gonna let that simmer for about 5 minutes. Last thing, we're gonna do 2 cups of cheese. You're gonna wanna keep stirring this as this melts to reach that creamy consistency that you want. Depending on how you want your soup texture, you can also remove this broccoli and start to blend this down to a smoother texture. I actually like the chunkiness, but that's up to you before you freeze dry. If you want a creamier version of this broccoli cheese soup, saute the broccoli separately from the rest of the vegetables. You can also add a handful of cashews. Blend this all together and this will make a creamier version of the broccoli cheese soup. Then add it back to your pot. Then add 2 cups of cheese. You're gonna melt the cheese. You want it to be smooth and part of the smooth consistency of the other ingredients. Then we're gonna add our broccoli back in.
Creamy broccoli cheese soup.
Last thing we want to do, we want to put our dividers in the 10 portion setting. That should give you a good serving size. We're going to push those down through the veggies, and then we're going to put a lid on so we can pre-freeze this before we go into the freeze dryer. Our frozen broccoli cheese soup with dividers, weighing in at 1984 grams. All right, that batch is ready to go. I want to talk about the freeze drying cookbook for a second. We're actually putting a lot of work into the freeze drying cookbook. This recipe and hundreds of other recipes will be updated with new pictures, new techniques, better rehydration formulas, improvements to the actual recipe itself as we learn, as everyone learns. In the freeze drying community, we are also adding nutritional facts to these as well. So the freeze drying cookbook website is getting updated as we speak, as well as the hard copies. So the new volume 1, volume 2 hard copies will be out soon. We are vigorously working on a volume 3 and potentially a compilation of volumes 1 through 3 as well. So stay tuned for that. Those will be coming soon. If you're not a member of the freeze drying community on YouTube, take a minute, join the Facebook group, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also take a minute to join our email list that can be found down in the description. We are not only doing a monthly giveaway of freeze drying products, but we will send you useful information, recipes, tips, any kind of sale that we know, any kind of information, or any kind of news that we find out. We're also doing a monthly featured freeze dryer. They could be freeze dryers on other socials. They are also people from our Facebook group that are highly motivated freeze dryers and very experienced. We also have a lot of exciting things going on in 2025, so make sure you stay tuned with that. Now let's get back to our broccoli cheese soup. All right, well, just under 30 hours on our broccoli cheese soup, and that looks good enough to eat. We're gonna do that in a second. I'm gonna weigh these trays before we get too far. That'll give us a good rehydration formula. Freeze-dried broccoli cheese soup, weighing in at 1032 grams. And you can see with the dividers, they're gonna pop right out, especially on the creamy one, and give us a nice brick of broccoli cheese soup. Super easy to rehydrate now. Now that we have this freeze-dried, we have 2 nice bricks of broccoli cheese soup. This will make it super easy to replicate this recipe in the future. It also makes it really easy to get a consistent rehydration. And as long as I did my math right, 1 cup will rehydrate 2 of these blocks back to where it was before we freeze dried. Well, I've been freeze drying since 2017. I've done a whole lot of different freeze dried foods. Every once in a while you do something new like broccoli cheese soup. And to me, this is just super cool. This is something that looks totally unique and it's gonna rehydrate perfect, I can already tell. But it's just super unique looking. You can tell it's broccoli cheese soup because you can see chunks of broccoli, you can see the cheese, you can see the color of the cheddar cheese. But to me, this just looks like the future of food. It looks like the future of freeze-dried food. It's just so unique, so cool, so futuristic looking. So with that said, let's rehydrate this and let's make some freeze-dried history. And I love these kind of foods because once the water hits, it almost just melts this whole brick. And the brick is dense, it's pretty rigid. I think it would travel okay as long as it was packaged okay, but it just melts apart as soon as you hit water. So you can have a rehydrated meal in really like a minute. And one of the best things about rehydrated food, aside from long-term storage and no refrigeration and things like that, is that you can adjust the texture and the consistency of something, especially like a soup, on the fly. So if you don't like the way this turns out, you just add more water or add less water. I always add water in slowly. I don't add the full amount in first, just in case, because it's very hard to remove moisture. It's very easy to add more. This has had a little bit of time to sit. Let's check out what it looks like. It looks like everything rehydrated great. The cheese did great. It's not chunky. It looks delicious. It looks fresh. And I'm pretty sure this is gonna taste as good as it looks. Nice chunks of broccoli in there. Cheddar cheese is nice and smooth. Everything rehydrated really well, no chunks or anything. Let's give this a taste test. That tastes identical to right before we freeze dried it. You'll notice that I went with the smooth texture version of this recipe. I think it's more visually appealing for freeze drying and people watching the video. I actually prefer the chunky version of this, but if you do the chunky version, make sure you allow just a little bit of extra time for those vegetables to rehydrate, especially if they're larger chunks. I love this recipe. I think this is great. I love doing recipes that I've never done before, or things that I've never done before. I haven't really done a whole lot of cheese items, but this freeze-dried and rehydrated beautifully today. I couldn't have asked for a better result. I love days like today because it just really justifies the freeze dryer and just shows people really its value. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for being part of the freeze drying community, and happy freeze drying.